Right, boys and girls, it's going to be something a little bit different. But you know, we've been singing maybe one verse that Jesus loves Brother Don. I want you to sing all of it. So I want you to sing Big Lamb, okay? Sing it with all of your heart. Because Jesus does love us, okay? All right, you ready? Page 336. 336. Ready? You got it? Sit back. Good job. All right. I want you to sing like you really mean what it says, okay? 336.
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to Him belong. They are weak, but He is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me, leading by heaven's gates to open wide. He will wash away my sins. Let His little child fall in. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me still. Though I'm very weak and ill, prophets shining on high, still watch me where I lie. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Jesus loves me, He will stay. Must He sign me all the way? If I love Him and I die, He will take me home on high. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
Did everybody enjoy that? Yes, sir. Let's do the big country amen. Amen. Class is formed, teachers take charge.
Sunday, we will come right here next to me. If you'll come, I've got something for you this morning, Sunday.
I thought y'all were fire.
You're on now. Okay. Talk to me.
Hello,
Keep talking.
hello, 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 hello. All right, let me get out of your way. Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Don't talk down in.
Check, check, check.
Hold it down.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Check, check, check. Good gracious. Causing problems already. I believe you good now. Check, check. I don't plan on doing any running if you want to turn this one on. Good morning, everybody. It's good to have everybody here today. We'll start out by going to the Lord in the word of prayer this morning. Does anybody over here have any prayer requests? Yes. Let's remember Miss Jackie. Anybody else over here? Brother Wayne? All right, let's remember this. Anybody else over here?
daughter's significant other, is dead, been taken to the hospital. She had stroke. Yeah.
Let's remember this gentleman. Anybody else over here? Yeah, they took Miss Dorothy to the hospital this morning. For those of y'all that don't know that, I think she fell Wednesday or Thursday, and her wrist. Well, then I think they said she couldn't feel her fingers this morning. So I think Miss Kathy was taking her. So y'all just remember her in your prayers. Anybody else over here? We have a big crowd over here. Anybody over here got a prayer request this morning? Miss Ruth.
Remember Dan, he come home from the hospital, and he's still not really good. What's going on with that? And he's here like another week to keep happening now. Keep happening.
Let's remember Danny and Miss April. Anybody else? Miss Carolyn? Oh, let's remember Miss Carolyn and her test. Anybody else over here? It's funny, they're in the light, y'all are in the dark over here. Brother Mitchell.
We need to remember each other. I had a coworker, Carly, we've been working with for a while. Well, our boss when he got hurt, he retired Friday. He was a big inspiration to me. I mean, he got old. He made mention on our Friday. He said, I'm gonna leave y'all. He said, I'm gonna should be y'all's prayer board. Some people sort of thought that was sort of funny. Hey, we did prayer board.
That's right.
Everybody and somebody, we need to pray for everybody, each other, on the team. It's a tough world out there. We see a lot of stuff.
Miss Carolyn.
Sorry, I forgot. Brandon and Abigail, both of them got pulling all over, so they went to urgent care. And she's a member of that program in Cooper, in California. He's having surgery, and they're trying to get the freezer right now.
Just remember this gentleman, remember his soul as well. That's more important, whether he gets better or not here, but you know, that's the most important thing with any of us. Anybody else? Did you have a request, Miss Linda? Oh, you fell this week too. Good gracious, we're gonna have to put get some bubble wrap around here.
Unfortunately, because of another church where I fell. I hope and pray there's no camera. I'm sorry.
Well, let's remember Miss Linda. I wish there wasn't a camera in here this morning. I told him, I said, I'm kind of nervous being on the spot this morning. But anybody else have any prayer requests? Miss Amy? Let's remember Brother Larry. Anybody else? If not, Bub, will you lead us in prayer this morning?
Thank you so much for just coming down and just stirring our hearts.
Yes, God, thank you.
Just pray that you can for everyone who's requested to be called out. Help us all. I know got a special burden. I just can't thank you enough for what you've done for us here at this church. We're so good.
Yes, God, thank you.
Praise you. Jesus' name.
Amen. This morning our lesson is coming out of Jeremiah, and that's who we're going to be talking about is Jeremiah's call and commission. I'll go ahead and apologize for y'all this morning. Jeremiah was the weeping prophet. Y'all may have a weeping Sunday school teacher this morning. It seems like God's really filled me up this morning. I hope I can get my point across this morning, but it seems like Well, it don't seem like it, but this quarter, when we started out, we got into the men of God that's been called. And, you know, if you've been saved, God's called you to do something. You know, there ain't none of us in heaven this morning, so God's still got something in store for all of us here. Whether it is be a prayer warrior, whether it is be a Sunday school teacher, or God calls you to preach, or just whatever it is. But the main thing is you got to be willing. But that first call you got to answer is that call of salvation. If God's calling you to be saved, you got to be saved. And you know, I teach in here, and you take advantage that, or take for granted that everybody is saved. But you know, I've seen church members get saved. I've seen you know, people that I thought was saved my whole life. I mean, even myself, I thought I was saved at one time, but God showed me that I wasn't. So I'm not going to take that for granted this morning that anybody is here. So we're going to talk to everybody like they're lost and like everybody's saved, and that way we'll get everybody covered. But starting our scripture this morning, Jeremiah 1, verse 4 says, Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, you know, God comes to you first before he goes to anybody else. Before he sends you to anywhere else, he's going to come to you first. You know, he's got to have your heart ready. He's got to have my heart ready. And that's just like the salvation, you know, being saved. You know, he's going to speak to you. And it's up to you whether you're willing or not to accept him. You know, and he deals with us on an individual basis. You know, it's not he deals with us as a group sometimes, but when he really gets personal with you, when he gets down to that, just you and him one-on-one, that's when it really gets sweet. And that's where Jeremiah was at. He was alone with God, and God had come to him, and he come to him saying, and you know, he's going to prepare us before he sends us out. And that's where we're at here in Jeremiah's life. You know, I don't know if any of you know much about Jeremiah. I learned a lot about him this week and studying, but you know, we're just in the first chapter here, but later on, about 30, 40 some more chapters, this man faces a lot of stuff. Just like us as Christians today, we're going to face a lot of stuff. But God don't send you out to face nothing that he's not going to prepare you for. He's not going to send you out alone. And that's the sweetest thing, to know that every morning when you get up, every morning when you go to bed, God's going to be there. He's going to keep your heart beat, and he's going to be there in the morning when you wake up. No matter how much hell comes against you the next day, he's going to be there for you. And if you'll put your hope and trust and faith in him, he's going to get you through. It may be a tough day, it may be a hard week, but he's going to get you through it. I wrote down here, what's God called you to do? You know, God had called Jeremiah to be a prophet. You know, there ain't many prophets today. There ain't no prophets today, because, you know, that's come to pass. But, you know, God calls us for something. You know, whether it's to be a faithful church member, whether it's to be a prayer warrior, or just to be there for somebody. God's called all of us to do something. But we've got to be about his business. I can't take for granted that somebody else is going to fill in the gaps if I don't. So I've got to be willing to stand, just like you've got to be willing to stand. Because it was nobody else's responsibility this morning to have this prepared for me, and I know everybody else don't get the chance to teach, but if anybody wants a chance, we'll put you in business. You know, I'm not saying I want to give you my Sunday or nothing, but we'll put you in business and let you stand and see how good it feels when God shows you all these blessings and different things. But verse 5 says, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. You know, God knew what he had in store for Jeremiah before he was even born, just like God knows each and every one of us before we was ever even born. You know, God knew that he was going to be able to use Jeremiah. He knew that he was going to call him to be a prophet. He knew that, you know, all the troubles and the trials that he was going to face, but he went ahead and called him anyway. He even knew that a couple verses on down that Jeremiah was going to try to back out and say, well, no, Lord, that's not me. I'm not good enough. But God knows, and if God's calling you to do something, you're capable of it. You know, you can say, well, you know, God, that's not me. I'm not very good with words. I'm not very good in front of a crowd or very good talking to people one-on-one. But if God's asked you to do something, He's already prepared you for it, or He's preparing you for it right then. And it's up to us whether or not we're willing to do it. You know, just like Wednesday night, we finished up our lesson, our studies on Revelation and the end of time. You know, the preacher was talking about if God would just lift the lid of hell off for just a few seconds to let us look in and see what kind of turmoil these people are in. We'd be knocking on doors every day. We'd be dragging people here. But every one of us, me, myself, come with just my family this morning. You know, yeah, we did go out and knock on a few doors yesterday to try to get people to come to Bible school, but how much am I doing that on a weekly basis? How much are you doing that? Because we can't leave it up to the preacher. We can't leave it up to the deacons. We've got to have a burden as well. You know, people are dying, going to hell every day. But if we don't pray for them, if we don't live that life before them, we're failing God. You know, we're failing what He's called us to do. Jeremiah was willing to go. You know, there's never a record of him ever winning anybody. Any converts in his whole ministry in the Bible was recorded that Jeremiah won anybody. But he still had the faith. You know, we could go out here and knock on every door from here to Robbins, from here to Ashburn, and not win anybody. But we could go and win everybody. But that's what he was willing to do. He was willing to go. And we've got to be willing to go. It was the middle part of that verse says he was sanctified. He was chosen. You know, we're chosen by God. You know, and if He's chose you to do something, you know, you better be doing it. You better not leave it up to somebody else to do it. You better not depend on somebody else to get the job done. If God's chosen you to do something, you better be willing to stand and to do what He's called you to do. And the last part of that says he was ordained. And that's another word for called. You know, we've all been called by God, but we must listen. You know, God can beat us over the head with every message, every Sunday school lesson there is. But if we're not going to listen, it's not going to do us any good. And that's, Jeremiah was willing to listen. He was willing to go. And us as Christians today, we've got to be willing to go. We've got to be willing to accept that call because, yeah, it's a whole lot easier to say, well, you know, Junior, he'll do my job for me. He'll do my praying for me. He'll do my going for me. I believe I'll just come sit on a church pew and let somebody else take part. And I'll come be faithful. But and that's not what God's called us to do. God's called us to go out and tell this lost and dying world. You know, if nothing else, we can live it before these people. You know, you never know who you're going to come in contact with. You know, somebody mentioned going to the grocery store. Maybe that's up in the prayer room down here. I can't remember. Everything's running together this morning. But, you know, just the people you come in contact with, we've all got to be willing to live that life. You know, if somebody sees me raising sand, carrying on, that ain't going to have much of a testimony. My testimony's going to be ruined. And that's not a good place to be, to have your testimony ruined. It's a long ways to come back from that. But God can bring you back from that. He can get you back to where you was and get you better than where you was. But you've got to be willing. You know, you could come in and say, well, God, it was fun while it lasted, and I believe I'll just come to church and maybe you might be able to use me. But if you're willing, God will use you, whether it's to teach or whether it's to, you know, to help out in Bible school. You know, this was a good opportunity this week to stand and fill in the gaps, because we've got to have people to fill in the gaps. Because, you know, Benji was talking about it in the prayer room. He can remember back when he had to, not necessarily that he had to be a teacher or had to do it, because he said, well, I did have to, because there wasn't nobody else willing to, or there wasn't enough people to do it. But, you know, I'm thankful that we have enough people here to do it, but we still need more. You know, we still need more prayer warriors. We still need more people willing to stand and teach. Verse 6 says, then said I, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. You know, what stood out to me in that is I cannot speak. You know, if God's called you to do something, He'll put the words in your mouth. He'll give you the words that you need to say to somebody, that what you need to live before that person. You know, I think back at all the guys and girls that I have working under me at work, and You know, if I can't do nothing else, I can live it before him. If I can't, you know, I clam up, I get bashful. You know, there's a couple of them I can really talk church good to because I know where he stands. And he's a good Christian man. It's easier to talk to somebody that's close to God than it is to somebody that's lost. But we've got to be willing to make ourselves uncomfortable, to get in those uncomfortable conversations with some people, because, you know, if they die and go to hell, their blood's going to be on our hands. You know, it's not going to be. It's up to us to do what God's called us to do, but we've got to be willing to do it. Jeremiah started with excuses. You know, sounds a little familiar. You know, God will call us to do something. He'll want us to do something. And we'll say, you know, Lord, that just don't sound like me. I can't get up in front of a Sunday school class. I can't teach a Bible school class. I can't be called on to pray. We can't give God excuses because He didn't give us any. He sent His only begotten Son to die for us. He could have backed out and said, well, you know what? Them people down there, they ain't worth dying for. Son, you just stay on up here with me. But He didn't. He sent Him on anyway, and He done it for us. And we've got to be willing to take that stand. Verse 7 says, but the Lord said unto me, say not, I am a child, for thou shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. Thou shalt go where I send thee. You know, are you willing to go where God sends you? You know, Jeremiah, God was telling Jeremiah, said, look, you're not a child. He said, I'm going to send you. And He said, I'm going to prepare you. You know, just some of the stuff that this man had to face later on. If he knew what he knew then, he probably would have tried to back out even more. But this man was still willing, and we've got to be willing. You know, Jeremiah was the prophet that they threw in the pit. You know, he was thrown in prison, and then they threw him in the pit to leave him to die. And God still got him out of that. Used some old rags to get him out of it. You know, God throw us an old rag every once in a while to get us out of that miry clay that we get stuck down in. You know, Brother Jared that was here for revival, him and his family sing a song. You know, it's mainly his sister singing it, but, you know, it talks about, you know, even though you're in the valley, God's done seen the mountain you're going to be on the other side. He's done prepared that mountain. He done knows where you're going to be at. You know, and you get down and you go to thinking, well, Lord, this is as bad as it's going to get. You know, I just don't think I can come out of this, but God's done seen the mountain that you're going to be on the other side. But it's up to you whether or not you're going to stand and crawl out and get out, because these men, they threw them old rags down to Jeremiah, and he could have just said, well, I don't want them rags. I ain't coming out of this. Lord, you done throwed me down here. I ain't no good for you. Don't even worry about me. But he didn't. He had to take a part in that just as well as we do as Christians today. We've got to be willing to take that part. And, you know, if he hadn't have put the old rags around underneath his arms where they could pull him out, he'd still been down there. He'd have died in that hole, but he didn't. He was willing to keep on going for God, because, you know, he had been called, and once you get that call from God, it's hard to not go. And just, there was another instance when Jeremiah was ready to quit. He was ready to give up. He did quit a little bit, but he said it feels like fire shut up in my bones. You know, that's the way we should be as Christians. His word should be like fire shut up in our bones, and we shouldn't be able to come in contact with anybody without mentioning God. And I come short of that just as much as the next person. But you got to take your liberty, because this world's going to take their liberty. They're going to put their filth in front of you and all the commercials and the different stuff. But we've got to be willing as Christians to throw it right back at them. We've got to be willing to put God in their face, just like they put all the trash and the filth in our face. Because if we don't, we're just no better than they are. We're just as guilty as they are. But we've got to be willing to take that stand. The latter part of that said, he said, whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. If God says speak, you speak. If God says nothing, you keep listening. You know, that's where we as Christians, a lot of times, we get ourselves in trouble. We hear a conversation, or we we come in and want to be all high and mighty and feel like we know everything about the Bible, and you hear somebody talking about the Bible or talking about church, and you come busting in there and you tear down more than what it took 10 preachers to build up. You know, that's a little bit what scares me about this camera being on over here. You know, y'all people in here forgive me a little bit easier than somebody watching online, because that person may not know, they may not be rooted and grounded like y'all are. But that's why we've got to be, as Christians, we've got to be rooted and grounded. We've got to tell others about the Lord. You know, we've got to read our Bible. We've got to pray, because that's the only way we're going to get closer. That's the only way our faith's going to get any stronger, is if we're in the book, if we're on our knees praying. You know, Zach gave me a book here a while back, and the guy that wrote it was talking about, it said, a praying man will stop sinning, but a sinning man will quit praying. You know, there's a lot of truth to that. You know, if you're on your knees daily and you're on your knees continuous in prayer and getting close to God, it's going to be harder for you to sin. But if you get backslidden away from God, that sin comes easier and you're going to quit praying. So one or the other is going to happen. Either you're going to go towards the sinning side or you're going to go towards the praying side. But that's our responsibility as a Christian. You know, we can't leave it up to somebody else to do all of our praying for us. Verse 8 says, "Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord." You know, it is frightful sometimes to get up in front of a crowd, or it is a little bit scary to take a stand sometimes, but we ain't got nothing to fear, because God's going to be with us all the times. You know, He may not be physically there standing beside of us, but He's there in spirit. He's there, you know, He's in our heart. He's there with us all the time. So we don't have nothing to fear. You know, if you go back and read some of the messages that Jeremiah had to give these people, he had to give some hard messages. And we've got to give some hard messages. You know, I'm not saying you got to go up and knock everybody in the head and tell them they're going to hell when you know they're lost. But that is a hard message to tell somebody that, hey, you're dying and going to hell if you don't change your ways. If you don't get saved, you are going to bust hell wide open. That's a hard message to tell. Jeremiah had some hard messages. He had to tell them, say, look, we're going into captivity for 70 years. They're going to come in. They're going to destroy the temple. They're going to take everything away from us. But God's going to build it back. And people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. People don't want to hear church. People don't want to hear what you've got to tell them. But you got to go ahead and take that stand just like Jeremiah did. He could have said, well, Lord, that's kind of a tough message. Maybe you ought to send that to somebody else and let them tell these people. Because Jeremiah had his family to turn against him, his friends turn against him, all because of the stand that he took. You know, if you're worrying about somebody that you have in your life, of how the stand that you're going to take or the message that you have to tell them, they're not much of a friend. If that's going to affect your friendship one way or the other, the stand that you have with God. If, you know, you say, well, what's them people at work going to think about me if I pray before a meal, or if I just come in here and say, well, you know what, let's talk about church a little bit. Let's talk about what God's done for me. Yeah, people may look at you a little bit funny, but they're not the friend that you thought they was if that affects your friendship. And that's the way Jeremiah was. His family wasn't right. His friends wasn't right. But he said, you know what, Lord, I know you right. I know you're not going to lead me astray. I'm going to keep going your way. And the rest of them, whether they come along, go with me or not, I'm going to go for you. And that's the way we got to be willing as Christians today. We can't, you know, it is good to have your family with you. It is good to have your friends with you. But if I ain't got God with me, the other two don't matter. You know, the other two don't, you know, if I got up this morning and the rest of my crowd didn't want to come with me to church, it ain't no excuse for me to still be at home. You know, it ain't no excuse for me to say, well, you know, Lord, they don't want to go. I just don't think I'm going to go. You got to get up and come on and go. You got to be faithful. Verse 9 says, "Then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said unto me, Behold, I have put my words in thy mouth." You know, you think back to last week, and our lesson was about Isaiah and his call. God kind of done the same thing with him. He touched his mouth with a fiery coal. And God done the same thing for Jeremiah. He put that word, that what he needed in his mouth. Jeremiah, it tried to quit, just like I said earlier. But, that touch that God gave him, he said it felt like fire shut up in his bones. We should go out of here with a message in our heart, whether it be winning the loss, whether it be getting somebody that's backslid that is away from God into God's house to where they can get saved. We've got to go out with that message. God's touched each and every one of us with words to say, but it's up to us whether or not we're willing to take that stand. If God gives you something and you don't go and tell it, or you don't go and do it, I feel for you, because that whooping you're going to take is a whole lot worse than that little bit of discomfort or that little bit of uncomfortableness it may be to take that stand. But we've got to be willing to take that stand. We can't let others do it for us. We've got to be willing to go. And verse 10 says, "See, I have this day set thee over the nations, over the kingdoms, to root out, to pull down, and to destroy, and to throw down, to build, and to plant." God told Jeremiah there would be destruction, but there would also be restoration. No matter how low we get, God will lift us back up. Like I said earlier, there was no recorded converts of Jeremiah's ministry in the Bible. Now, there may have been some that was overlooked, that just didn't get put in there, but there was no recorded converts in Jeremiah's ministry, but he still went anyway. We may go and tell everybody at work about what God's done for us, and it may not get through to somebody, but you planted that seed. That seed's been planted. Just like this week in Bible school, people say, well, some of these kids that's going to come, they're too young to even understand. It's good to get them here and get them out of the world, but they're kind of young. You'd be surprised at how young that seed gets planted in people's lives, in young people's lives, and adults as well. We're going to have a teenager and an adult class. I invite every one of you to come this week and be a part of it. But it don't matter how young or how old you are. God's not too small or too big to do anything for us. He can save the oldest person here. He can save the youngest person here. And that's just the type of God I serve. He's no respecter of men. But we've all got to be willing to answer that call. We've got to, if God's calling you to do something, if God's calling you to be saved, I wouldn't wait, because He may not give you another breath. I'd hate to know that I was playing with my life, whether I was going to live in heaven or go to a devil's hell. I'd hate to know that. But there's people that we come in contact with daily that is what's going to happen to them. We've got to have a burden for them, because they may not go to church. They may not have the same luxury you do as being raised in church or have that desire to come to church. But we've got to be willing to take that stand, because if we don't, it's our fault. It's our fault. I said in the beginning about Jeremiah being the weeping prophet. I apologize for the tears, but I ain't going to apologize for them, because I'd rather have tears than have a hard heart to where God couldn't speak to me, where God couldn't use me. I've been there before. I've got mad on God and it's, Lord, why'd you let this happen? Why'd you let that happen? And He took the tears away. That was a painful time, a time that I don't want to have to go back through. So I'm not going to apologize for the tears. But I do thank everybody for their attention this morning. I feel like I stumbled and mumbled and we got through it, but I sure do appreciate y'all's good attention. And Benji, he'll be back next week to take over. And like I say, if you can't come to Bible school this week, please be in prayer for the teachers and the students as well. There's a lot of Bible schools going on around us, but I still believe that God can fill this place up. He can fill that place up over the road, or a couple places over the road up, but He can still fill this place up as well. And come out and be a part of it. You never know what kind of blessing you'll receive from just coming, seeing some of these little youngins. You might even learn something yourself. I learn stuff every year from coming and helping. But we've got to take part. We've got to be willing to be faithful. And when God asks you to do something, don't put it off. Don't let somebody else get your blessings. I'm going to say it one time before I get done, because I seem like I say it every time. I don't want no rock getting my blessing. I don't want no rock having to cry out for me because I'm too sorry to do it. So we'll all stand and let's see. Brother Benny Beck, will you dismiss us in prayer?
Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come to your house.